Okay, for example 1, we just have to work out values of sec and cosec and cot. So first of all, we know that sec, we look at the third letter, and that tells us it is the same as 1 over cos of 40 degrees. So I get my calculator, and first of all I'm going to do shift to get set up and make sure that my angle is in degrees. There we go, and I will do 1 over cos of 40. There we go. So there's my answer, 1.31. Okay, right, let's look at cosec of pi over 5. We look at the third letter. That reminds us we have 1 over sine pi over 5. Okay, so I need to be back in radians for this one. So we go to setup and we change back over to radians, and we do 1 over sine of, and then again a fraction, pi over 5. Okay, and that gives us 1.70. Okay, and then we're back in degrees again for the third one, so off we go again. Alright, so again I want a fraction. Now cot is 1 over tan. Okay, so we do 1 over tan of 250. Okay, and that gives us positive 0.364. Okay, right, for the last one, we're given that tan of pi over 6 is 1 over root 3, which we ought to know anyway. Find the exact value of cot 5 pi over 6. Okay, so it's not the same angle, but it is related. Now, to do this one, it would be a good idea to use a cast diagram. Okay, and look at where 5 pi over 6 is. Okay, well we know that we go from 0 round to pi over 2, which would be 3 pi over 6, and then we keep going to get to pi, which would be 6 pi over 6, so we know it's going to be in the second quadrant here. We know that this is 5 pi over 6, which just leaves a single pi over 6, which is very useful, okay, in this area here. So that means that to get our cot of 5 pi over 6, that's going to be the same as doing 1 over tan 5 pi over 6, and we know that tan of 5 pi over 6 is going to be related to tan of pi over 6. Okay, right, tan of pi over 6 is acute. Pi over 6 is acute, so tan will be positive. But here, the only thing that's positive is sine. And so we know the tan of 5 pi over 6 would be negative tan of pi over 6. Okay, so we want to do the negative reciprocal of 1 over root 3. So that gives us minus root 3. Okay, if you prefer, you can draw the tan graph instead. Okay, so we'll just see how that works. If we drew the tan graph, okay, here is pi over 2, here is pi, and so we know that 5 pi over 6 is going to be here, and that is showing us that tan is negative, but pi over 6 is here, which shows us that tan is positive, and it's the same distance, okay, from pi as pi over 6 is from 0. Okay, so we know we have the same value, but we end up with negative. I find it easier to follow cast, but you can use the graph if you prefer. And let's have a look at your marvellous calculators. So this time I want to do 1 over tan of, and it's 5 pi over 6. Now before I press go, I'm going to just check. I was in degrees, I need to be back in radians, and now I can execute, and it gives me it exactly. But older calculators can't give you it exactly.